Hello and welcome to Monster of the Week. Today we are talking about an extremely powerful creature inspired by Aztec legends. The one, the only, that thing. You all know how to pronounce it. I don't need to say it for you. I obviously know how to pronounce it too, because who wouldn't? Jokes aside, I did a lot of research trying to figure out exactly what the correct way to actually say this creature's name is, and my findings were pretty inconclusive, so I'm not even gonna try. Please leave a comment below if you are familiar with the Aztec language and you can spell this out for me phonetically, because I'm pretty lost. But for the purposes of this video, or the purposes of you at home, if you want to use it at your table and you also don't know how to say it exactly right, you don't want to look like a dang ass fool, you could always refer to it as a star child or goddess of the stars or something like that, because that's literally what this creature is. They are pretty malevolent Aztec gods of the stars, essentially, who their whole goal in life is to destroy the sun, blot it out, herald the apocalypse, and then come down to Earth to consume every living thing alive. So yeah, they don't really get invited to parties that much with the other gods, I don't think. But that's not for lack of trying, at least when it comes to fashion, because they appear as these 50-foot tall skeletal beings, totally decked out in gold and feathers and all kinds of ritualistic things like human hands hung around their neck. That's pretty cool. Also, there's not really a super elegant or smooth way to transition into talking about this, so I'm just gonna let you know that they have giant eyeballs in the center of their hands and at every single one of their joints, because who doesn't need an extra pair of eyes on their elbows, knees, and toes? So, are you interested yet? Because you should be. This is an insane creature. There's so much about it that is just why. Like, I know humans have come up with a lot of crazy myths in the past, but this is just egregiously uncool. So today we're going to get into just exactly what this creature is, where it comes from, and all that jazz, but I do want to give a special shout out to Autumn's Fire for sponsoring this video, and we'll hear more about that fantasy book later on. But for now, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what this creature actually is. I mean, at least in the sense of the gaming world. The creature I'm basing this off of was originally statted out and comes to us from Pathfinder, the home of every single obscure myth turned into a gaming monster that has ever existed. And that Pathfinder stat block, well, of course it does take a few liberties and kind of changes things up a little bit to make them more gamey. It's still pretty faithful to what the original interpretation of the myth was, and I think that's pretty cool. So first off, of course, I'm going to talk about what this thing can actually do in combat, so you have a better understanding of just how horrific and terrifying it is. I don't know what to tell you. I've been quarantined for like 3 weeks now. I'm starting to go a little stir crazy, and I just felt like making a giant skeletal god demon that could just eradicate an entire species if it felt like it. What are you gonna do? Am I right? But seriously, they are CR18 and they are terrifying. So first things first, let's talk about some. So when it comes to combat, first suggestion, don't. But if you do find yourself fighting this thing, you're going to want to watch out for its two massive claws and its bite attack. Because as I mentioned, with the whole devouring of every living creature thing, yeah, they bite people. And a bite from this is not going to be just like a little chihuahua nipping at your heels, kind of, ow, no, that's cute, but stop. It's more like you're gonna be bludgeoned to death by teeth the size of tombstones. Just not a good time, really. And of course, being a crazy god demon from the stars, it has an ability called eye gaze, because of course it does. And this is literally just a giant laser beam that shoots out of its eyes. I don't know what to tell you about that one. It's a straight up laser beam attack, targets one creature, single target, and if it hits you, you take 11d6 force damage and 11d6 lightning damage, which is just the worst. Fortunately, that ability is on a recharge, but we're gonna get more into why that doesn't matter in a minute here. Its other big major attack that is going to certainly terrify everybody is called Eclipse. As I briefly mentioned, these creatures literally exist to destroy light and to blot out the sun. So of course they would have an ability called Eclipse. Essentially what it does is it creates a 60-foot radius sphere of darkness. And this ain't your dad's darkness, this is magical darkness.
Advanced darkness.
It's also worth noting that any creature in the area when the darkness is created also takes a ton of cold damage. And by a bunch of cold damage, I mean 8d8 cold damage, so it's nothing to take lightly when you consider the fact that this could hit the entire party as well as whatever NPCs they've suckered into coming to their deaths and fighting the giant skeleton god. Other fun thing about this magical darkness is that it is permanent. It does not go away. It does not fade after a certain amount of time. The skeleton god doesn't have to focus on it. It's just, that's darkness there now. It can be dispelled if you cast a dispel magic of 4th level or higher. And of course, if the actual creature is slain, the darkness that is created throughout its extremely long and unending life goes away. I guess it's not really unending if you end it, but you get the idea. And that is basically everything that this creature can do in combat. Surprise, motherfucker! It's got legendary actions, because of course it does. This wasn't a thing with the original stat block, of course, because it came from less refined times, but since we have legendary actions now and this thing is literally a legend, it's gonna have a few legendary actions. I tried to keep it relatively simple, but, you know, skeleton's got a skella. That doesn't make any fucking sense. I'm just gonna take a break here for a second and, let's check in with you guys. How are you all doing? I hope everyone's doing good in this quarantine situation because, I mean, it sucks. You know, self-isolation is brutal. And if you are still going to work, bless your soul. I seriously, like, thank you. Whether you're a grocer or a banker, because God knows the banks aren't shutting down for this. Whatever it is, you're awesome. I appreciate you. And if you're stuck at home like me, I'm sorry, we're all in it. Anyways, just wanted to say I hope you guys are all doing okay, and thanks for being here. So the first legendary action it has is called Devour, because this thing loves to just consume flesh and kill people. So it of course gets to make a bite attack if it uses its Devour legendary action, which costs 1 of its 3 actions. The second one it has is called Focus, and hey, remember when I said we were going to see about that whole thing not mattering? Well, this is it. If it uses 2 of its legendary actions, it can refocus its eye beam, which means that it doesn't have to worry about that whole recharge thing. It can just blast every single turn if it so chooses to. That said, it will be giving up one of its other pretty dope legendary actions, but if you really need to just blast someone with an eye beam, this is the legendary action for you. It's also got an ability which costs 2 actions called Translocate, which is Misty Step for giants. And it has Disrupt Life, which costs all 3 actions and is straight up ripped off from the Lich. I'm not afraid to say that. For those of you who are not aware, Disrupt Life causes all creatures within a 20-foot radius surrounding you, or in this case, that thing. And everyone involved just takes a bunch of necrotic damage. Pretty cool. Unless you're, you know, alive, I guess. Oh, something I also almost completely forgot to mention, how embarrassing. Whenever this creature kills a living being, in 1d4 rounds it rises as a zombie. And I mean, zombies, by the time your party's even close to the level they're going to be fighting this thing, it's almost irrelevant. Like, you're talking about CR 1/4 creatures, but it is just an extra body that's going to be clawing at them and possibly breaking concentration on spells or just literally getting in the way of melee fighters while they're trying to actually fight the big bad enemy in this situation. So, I mean, it's not great. In any case, that pretty much sums up how this creature is going to rip and tear through everything your party cares about. So let's take a moment and talk about some. So, I think we can all agree the consensus from the whole combat section is basically just don't fight these things. But if your party decides they do want to fight one of these things, I've thought of a few neat ways that we can maybe make that happen. Something kind of neat about the original legend of this creature is that it was one of many of its kind that occupied the stars. And every 52 years, the end of the Aztec calendar cycle, everyone would go up to this giant mountain and they would basically just watch the heavens and they would see a singular star kind of make its path across the night sky. And as long as this star, which legends say was an actual being akin to one of these things, actually made its whole course, then everything was all good, the sun was going to come up the next day, and we'd start the next 52 years anew. If the star did not make its full cycle, that meant the world was going to end, a giant earthquake was going to happen, these star children gods were going to devour the sun and kill everybody. But I mean, hey, it's a statutory holiday, so even if the world does end, at least you don't have to go to work, am I right? So, that sounds like a pretty cool setup for a D&D campaign, if you ask me. You could easily adapt a version of this sort of ritual and this myth into your game, and then maybe when the people go up to observe the path of the star, it doesn't complete its journey, and it descends to the earth, and it starts just running amok. You could set this up in such a cool way where you have like your players kind of engaging in this festival, and the first bit of the session is all kind of RP focused, and they're like feasting and enjoying games and other traditions involved with the holiday. And then when it comes time to actually observe the star, which everyone assumes is just going to make its path, it doesn't, and then it just turns into pandemonium. In a campaign like this, I would probably start the party out like a little bit too low level to fight this thing. So when they realize that like, oh man, we need to get out of here, it turns into a run for survival so they can regroup, get whatever gear and spells and rituals they need to actually fight back, and then come back to confront this thing as like the final boss of the campaign. Or if you wanted this to be kind of a higher level game, maybe they could fight this thing off, and then it turns out this is just one of like hundreds of them that have come to the earth, and there's actually an even bigger deific force kind of commanding all of them, and then that is like your big campaign and boss, so to speak. I think that could be really cool. It's really weighty in terms of how you want to use it. Like, this isn't something you could just drop into a game. Be like, oh, today we're fighting this, and your players go, why do you hate us? But as like the centerpiece or a very important part in a bigger campaign, it can be really cool. If you want to approach that same idea but from kind of a different angle, maybe these things actually tried to herald the apocalypse once a long time ago, and heroes of that age rose, defeated them, and imprisoned them deep within the earth. Because, I mean, they couldn't actually destroy them being godlike beings, but they were able to essentially seal them away. And now there's like this ancient tomb that's been hundreds of feet below the earth that no one has even known about. Like, it's since long past faded into myth and legend, and the heroes who sealed it away have been long since forgotten. And then it rises again, and then it falls on your party to understand what this thing is, where it came from, kind of unpack the ancient myths, and find out how those heroes sealed it away in the first place so they can do it again. And who knows, if they're super competent, roll a few nat 20s here and there, maybe they even find a way to actually destroy it for good. I don't know, I think cyclical kind of threats like that are pretty interesting, so it could be neat. Or, if you're kind of bored of the campaign you're in and you want to just end it, spring it as a random encounter and tell your players that you rolled 500 100% on the percentile table. They'll think it was truly random, and then you can stop being a forever DM. In any case, however you choose to use this creature, I'm very excited to hear about it from you guys and hear what plot hooks and ideas you might have in the comments below, or on Discord, or on Twitter, or wherever you choose to write words that we can all read. But I would be remiss if I did not mention our sponsor, Autumn's Fire. This video is sponsored by Autumn's Fire. Autumn's Fire is a fantasy slice-of-life novel with romantic elements that takes place in a magical world where there are over 50 races. The main characters, Autumn and Creole, experience a fantastical friendship in this unique story that will leave you hoping, yelling, wondering, and crying over the journey that takes place. To learn more or to buy the book, visit MacyCarson.com. So once again, thank you so much to Autumn's Fire for bringing us here today to talk about this giant sun skeleton monster, because when you sponsor this channel, that's what you sign up for. But seriously, if that sounds appealing to you, there's a link in the description below. Definitely go check it out. And of course, the stat block for this monster, containing everything you need to run it in 5th edition D&D, is also in the description below in the form of a Google document. And if you are one of my fantastic patrons, you can also find the kind of more fancy schmancy monster style stat block, that's not a word, monster manual style stat block on the Patreon page. If you're not one of my patrons, definitely recommend checking it out. It's $3 a month, you get a few cool stat blocks, you get stuff early. They always get the stat blocks a few days early before I do these videos. And sometimes I even get to eat food with the money. I do also want to give a super special shout out to all my patrons, past and present, because I recognize that right now is a pretty financially draining time for a lot of people.
So to those of you who have had to stop subscribing on Patreon, I totally get it. It's all good. Still love you. And for those of you who are continuing to subscribe on Patreon, you are helping me out more than you know, because aforementioned horrible time, right? And most importantly, thank you guys, all of you, so much for watching. I do appreciate it, and that's what keeps me making these videos. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Until then.
Tzitzimitl. 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 Tzitzimitl? Tzitzimitl? T-Zizzy-T-Mizzy? Tzitzimitl. 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 That's, I think, that's not right.